Okay, now, everybody hear me now? Not hear anybody else? Okay.
Sounds good so far.
All right, this is working. Hard as that is to believe. Welcome to our weird meeting. I don't even know who's all here.
Really strange.
Hey, hi, folks. Let me see here. I gotta pull up something. I am totally unprepared, believe it or not. And I know how unusual that is. Shut up, Candace. Well, yeah, I don't know. Usually the only person that's got anything going on coming up is Max at this point. Although I would tell you, I've been hard at work scheduling upcoming meetings. They're mostly going to be Zoom or hybrid meetings. But without looking them up, I've scheduled everything through October, I think. Except for next month is going to be Tom Farron. He had just went on an extensive trip and is going to be sharing. Well, we'll pretty much have a travelogue next month with some of his fun stuff. And then we've got, well, let me look it up. If I can find a calendar. I don't like a phone app. All right. Oh, okay. August, outdoor adventure photography with Merrill Images. I think that was suggested by Scott. September, nature's fireworks, photographing the volcano whose name I can't pronounce.
Tim Chapman. Is that Tim Chapman?
Yeah, Tim Chapman. That was suggested by Candace. And let's see, that was September. October, I haven't written that up yet, and I can't remember what that one is. Well, it doesn't matter. You'll be getting an email on it shortly.
I think we already did for October.
Oh, did we? All right.
I don't remember what it was. I didn't sign up for it yet. I figured I had plenty of time.
Yeah, you got time.
No rush, Gordon.
I don't know. Let's see. Where's October? Where I've screwed up a couple of times, and I may have done it again on this one, is when I scheduled it, I did not. Oh, October is learning to use Lightroom's classic new masking panel. And this one is suggested by Rick. And this is the presentation that was given this month at West Valley Camera Club, and I've heard good things about it. So, and the gentleman was more than anxious to come down here. And in November, I'm talking with a guy about doing a lighting presentation that it's a Tamron representative that recently had a little workshop down at Focal Point, and hopefully he'll be here in November to talk to us about lighting. So that takes care of the year, because of December is usually a Christmas party, and hopefully we'll all be back here drinking eggnog. So, okay. All right, Max, take it away.
Well, I'm trying to share my screen, and I hope you're seeing the meetup page for the early gas engine and tractor swap meet. It's Friday the 24th and the 25th. I've set a time for Friday the 24th at 8:30, but feel welcome to go out there anytime during those 2 days. This is an event that I have not previously been part of, so it's an adventure, but we get inside the park anyway, and there's always things to shoot in there, especially this time of year when it's not as hot, just when you go to the steam up during the August and July. So that's what I have coming up there. Now, as far as our program, let me,
Before we go any further, will you mute your speakers and your?
Oh, okay. I'm gonna mute mine and turn the vocal back over to Matt.
all righty. Now, if people get lost partway through this, speak up. I mean, there's not so many of us that we can't have kind of an interactive exchange. But my goal in this is to talk about how to make Photoshop work for you. And a lot of making Photoshop work for you happens before you get into Photoshop. Now, I'm going to click on sharing again and get this screen. Most of us have this plan here, the $9.95 a month plan. You know, interesting, if you just get Photoshop, it's $9.95 a month. If you get Photoshop with, and most of us are using Lightroom Classic with it, it's $9.95 a month. So a person might as well have the plan with the two. And then in addition to that, there are a lot of other programs that come with it that I'm going to mention just in a second here.
Are you sharing your screen?
I'm trying to.
Okay,
Are you seeing my screen?
I'm seeing you.
we're seeing you.
Oh, that's a disappointment. Now, help me along here. Tell me what you're seeing.
We're seeing it.
We're seeing your screen.
All right. Well, this is bound to be better. This is saying 1 terabyte of storage, but it's actually 20 gigabytes. Now, mindful of the fact that there are going to be people watching this recorded, I have this screen, and if you're watching it recorded, you can just pause it and copy down the links. There is a handout that goes with this, and if you review the handout before you listen to the program, you'll get a lot more out of the program. There also are a couple of file downloads that we're going to talk about a little bit later into the program. But these are the links you need if you're watching this later, especially if you can't get into the Digital Photo Group website. Now, back to that plan. We have Photoshop, we have Lightroom Classic. Lightroom is really more to hook up with the cloud stuff and the mobile device. They also have Rush, which is a pretty decent video editor, and Bridge, which is sort of like Lightroom, but it integrates with some of the other Adobe applications, and it really isn't very useful to us. There's also included in the plan is the Creative Cloud link, the fonts. There's an awful lot of things on the web that you can get, and there are applications for your phone. Premiere Rush Mobile is not a bad application to have for recording video, and Lightroom on the phone is something that I recommend for shooting pictures rather than the phone app on your phone, because on a lot of phones, it will allow you to shoot in RAW, and it will also automatically upload your materials onto the Adobe Cloud. First question, why bother with Photoshop? A lot of people don't like to bother with Photoshop because they see it as more work, but there's quite a difference in the quality of the pictures you can get if you can use Photoshop. I'd be so bold as to say, if you're not using Photoshop, you really need to think about whether you want to have the Adobe plan at all, because there are other standalone programs that will do a lot of what Lightroom does and some of what Photoshop does, and they might serve you better. Photoshop is the real attraction in the Adobe plan. Now, here's an example. This is a picture of a Stellar's J that I worked in Lightroom. It could perhaps be a little bit lighter, but there just isn't a whole lot that you're going to do to make this picture better. Here, we'll raise the exposure a little. It's still going to be flat. Okay, so we send it to Photoshop and work it a little there, and pow! All of a sudden, we've got a picture with a lot more detail and contrast in the areas where you want to see it. And even the black and whites that come out of Photoshop have a lot more interest. Here's a picture of a cedar waxwing. And, you know, the bird was pretty cooperative, but quite frankly, that picture is pretty flat. That's Lightroom. Here is a little bit of attention to the same picture in Photoshop. You can control the tonality much better, and you sometimes can do a lot better color correction. Here's one more example from Lightroom, and you can see that we've got this chickadee up in the tree, and he's kind of happy. You know, raise the exposure a little. It's going to be flat. It's just going to be flat. But go over to Photoshop, and all of a sudden you've got something with some interest to it. So it's worth it to spend the extra effort to take your images to Photoshop. The problem with Lightroom is that there are multiple ways to mess yourself up if you've got pictures that are going on to Photoshop, and you can be messed up without even realizing what it's done to you. That's because Lightroom is trying to appeal to an audience that have a lot of different goals. And kind of the lowest common denominator is appealing to people who want to make Lightroom their sole editing platform. And so it has built into it defaults that maybe help you along a little too much when you're trying to just run a picture in and see it pop up on your screen, sort of a no-brainer approach. But they can work against you when you take that picture into Lightroom. So here's a picture that shows what the defaults do in the Lightroom settings. You can see we're getting Adobe Color over here. Go on down. You're going to see that we're getting, where are we? We're getting some sharpening and some noise reduction that you may or may not, probably don't want in your picture this early in the process. The other thing that it's not doing is it's not turning on chromatic aberration. Enable chromatic aberration, that's not on by default. If you turn, now what I've done is I've created a preset. All right, we're back in business. What we have here is a raw file coming into Lightroom with the Lightroom defaults. You see the hair and the legs, all this stuff is really quite dark. That's because it's set on Adobe Color. Even if you increase the exposure, let's just click auto for a second, and you'll see it still stays really dark. It's trying to help you out if you're making your picture in Lightroom, but it's screwing you up if you're going to Photoshop because you're going to have these deep shadows to try and deal with. Now here, this is with Adobe Neutral and the other before Lightroom settings that I recommended. How you set up that preference is to go up here to Edit, Preferences, clicked over on me, and abracadabra, External Editing. You want it set on, if you're going to edit in Photoshop, you want it coming out in PSD. Pick a color space, not sRGB. I recommend ProPhoto. And this is huge. Make sure it's kicking it out in 16-bit component. If Lightroom is kicking your photos out in 8-bit, you're basically getting JPEG set into Photoshop, and that is not going to help you. So there are different ways to process your raw images into bitmapped images, that basically turning the raw data coming off of the photosensor into pixels. Now, Lightroom has its own, I'm going to zoom in on this so you can see how bad it is. I hope you can see all of the noise and softness. Lightroom also includes an enhanced detail option, which to my mind is basically no better. It's not worth fooling with. Nikon gives you its own free program for doing this, and it's worse. Not only is the noise horrible, but their auto settings do a lousy job on color. Next screen, this is Topaz denoise. It has a raw converter in it, and it's not too bad. It's not too bad. The other advantage of Topaz is it will work with JPEG files. Topaz also has a sharpening routine that you can use on raw files. I find that it's too aggressive. And then there are the options that come from DxO. They have a DxO Deep Prime, and they have DxO Photo Lab. Now, I'll show you these on the web for just a second. We're not going to waste a lot of time. Pure Raw is just a one-click, one-shot, our best settings. There's very little you can do to customize. It's $129, but it really cleans up the noise in your photos. Photo Lab is basically a Lightroom substitute, but if you're paying for Lightroom because you want Photoshop, you're not going to be abandoning Lightroom. You're just going to be using this as an outside application to process your photos after you've got them in Lightroom. But it has superior abilities to hold your blacks. And it also does a better job of color correction, gives you a lot more control. So just to quickly show you what this does, here is a Milky Way picture come out. Just default what Lightroom is going to give you. But this is default what the DxO programs are going to give you. Again, Lightroom and DxO. I mean, there is absolutely no comparison. You come in on this and you see the detail, and it gets rid of a lot of the noise. This basically is a whole lot of nothing, and this turns it into a picture. So that's why I'm recommending this stuff as a pre-processing before you work your pictures in Lightroom. I'm going to give you one other one to see here. This is a picture shot at 102,000 ISO. I mean, this is high end. Yeah, well, what do you expect? It's 102,000 ISO. That's default from Lightroom. This is Lightroom with the neutral filter. You're not going anywhere with that, I don't think, but you run it through the other program and all of a sudden you've got a picture. Look at that. It hasn't eliminated all the noise, but we're at 100%. You go out to a normal picture and golly, you've got an unbelievable picture. Here's a finished image that's been edited through, but see how clean that is? That's why I'm pushing this stuff. It really, really, really makes a difference. Here is another. And here's the finished image. Night and day, night and day. I know it's another $100 or $200, or if you buy the Topaz packages, $300, but there you are. So we're going to Photoshop. It's time to talk about what to do going into Photoshop. If you don't do anything else before you go to Photoshop, press down the Alt key and slide the blacks and find your black clipping point. And then do the same thing with the whites. Find your white clipping point. Because if your whites and your blacks are clipped coming into Photoshop, you're not going to fix it in Photoshop. You need to make, even if it makes your image look flat and uninteresting, that's fine. Get rid of the clips before you go to Photoshop. Now you can do a lot of other things. You can crop, but I don't like to crop because you lose pixels that you may want later. You can work with taking out the spots in your picture, but there are better tools for that in Lightroom. I suggest a really light hand in Lightroom or Camera Raw before you go in. Now, I already covered the settings to make sure that you're importing into Photoshop in 16-bit. So we're going to take a couple of these and we're going to go to Photoshop. Edit in, Photoshop. And Photoshop is going to open, and what do we see? Well, what we see is a mess. There's a whole lot of screen, and you got to ask yourself, what's the significance of the stuff that they're showing me? This is going to open with the default screen. Abracadabra. Okay. Picture will be here in a minute. Hello, picture. All right, here's one. Now over on this side, you've got your colors, your swatches, gradients, patterns, things that are taking up space that you're not going to use very often. Properties, which is a really important panel that you're going to use over and over in your work. Adjustments, which you probably libraries, which is going to help you if you're hooked to the web. And then these panels down here, you're going to be using the layers and the channels a lot. Paths, very seldom. And then here are adjustments. Up here is a menu of different things you can pull down, such as the filters and image controls. And over here is your toolbar. It's got things like moving and cropping and selecting, and we're going to get a sense of how to go about that. But the first thing to do when you come into Photoshop is go up to Windows, click Arrange, and click Consolidate All Tabs. That's going to put a tab at the top for each of the images that you've got open and allow you to easily move between them. Second thing, Windows, Workspace, and go, if you don't do anything else, go to Photography. Now you've got a much more useful layout over here on the right-hand side of the screen. You've got brushes, you've got a navigator that you can use to zoom in, zoom out, move around your image. You've still got your properties bar, you've still got your channels, and you've got some tools over here. You've got your history, you've got your actions, you've got brush settings in the brush panel, you've got the clone source tool, and libraries and the information panel. So that's going to serve you better, even if you just do that one click. Now, the next thing to talk about is why you use layers. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to take this image here, we're going to get our brush tool, and we're going to set for default colors. So we're going to be painting with black. Whoa, I'm going to increase the flow up here. All right, painted with black. Isn't that cool? Problem is, that's on your image. You don't want to be painting on your image. You don't want to be doing any of these adjustments directly on your image. So we're going to Control Z and get rid of that. And we're going to make a new layer. Okay, now we've got a new layer over here. See, you can click here on the hamburger menu and type new layer, and it will get you a new layer. All right, so now we're going to paint on the layer. We could be doing any adjustment. And so now the changes show up on a layer on top. And if you don't like it, you can click on the eyeball and get rid of it. It's non-destructive. Also, you can change the opacity of that correction very easily. You can change the blend mode. So if you put it on, let's see, here's soft light. Here's, well, if you turned on saturation, it isn't going to do a thing. divide, it turns it white. But the point of it is you have a lot more control and you've got a way out. That's the key to this. So we're going to turn that off. Now, first thing to do when you get into an image, or that I do when I get into an image in Lightroom, is I run a curves adjustment. So I click down here on the adjustments. Okay, this is for layers. If you want to get rid of a layer, you can drag it down to the garbage can. Okay, if you want to change the order of the layers, you can drag them around like so. Here, I'm going to Control J this to get a duplicate of it. Okay, now I can change the order that things are in the stack. I can group layers. Get this one and Control G, and I've made them into a group. And then if I want to, I can mask that group. I'm going to click the little mask button down here. So I've got a mask. And how masks work is if it's white, you can see what is happening in the adjustment part of it. If it's black, then you can't see what's going on in the adjustment part of it. So I'm going to invert this, Control I. Well, we're going to have to go in here and do something fantastic, like turn this on. All right. Now we're going to go on this mask. The trickiest part of working with these layers is making sure that you've got the right thing active, the mask and not the adjustment. So we're on this. I'm going to invert it, and it comes back on. Now, you can have a group that only has one layer in it. So if you have something going on in a layer and then you want to put a blend mode or another mask on top, you can put that single layer in its own group, and then you can change the settings up here for the group. Or if you have a bunch of adjustments that you want all controlled in one way, you can group them. Or if you just don't want to get confused and lost, you can put all of the adjustments that are somewhat the same into a group and work with it that way. Okay, we're having fun with the grouping. Now, we're going to get rid of this. We're going to get rid of this. Whoop, rid of it, I said. And we're going to do a selection. Okay, there are lots of different ways to do selections, but probably the easiest way, well, we can try doing select subject, which is up here, select subject, where did it go? We're just going to use the magic wand. Try and select him. Got to be on a layer that's got pixels. This is not going well, is it? That's because it's still on brush. See, I want the magic wand. See, I'm using these fancy press the button tools, and I'm not always getting the tool that I want to have. This is the object selector. See what it's going to do? But if you get a tool and you don't get the right one, because some of these tools have share keystrokes, okay? If you Shift W, it's going to cycle through all of the tools that are underneath this that are triggered by the W. So I'm going to get the magic wand and just go around this guy real quick. If I want to select more, I hold the Shift key and it will add to the selection. If I want to select less, get rid of part of it, I hold the Alt key and it's going to take the selection back. If I hold the Control key, it's going to move it. If I hold the Control key and the Shift key, it's going to constrain it so it moves it in a straight line. So he's selected, but it's not very good. Next thing to know about selection is under the select menu. You can get here different ways. There's select and mask, or you can just right click on your selection and go to select and mask. And that gives you another panel that you can use to refine your selection. This is critical when you're doing hair or bird feathers or anything that's got a fine edge that kind of blends into other areas. Turn on Smart Radius, and then you've got 3 tools. Where are those 3? Oh, they're over here. This is just your quick select tool. This is the one you're going to be using most of the time. And this is just a brush, so you can brush white or black to change the area selected. We're going to grab this thing, the middle one. And when you trace along the edge of your selection, it does a much better job of picking up what you wanted and leaving out what you didn't. See it cleaned up. See if it's going to clean up around that arm. But it cleaned up his hair pretty nice. Still isn't getting his arm. What's going to happen over here on this arm? See, it's working better on the arm now. It's working better on the shoulder. It's working better on this perimeter. And you can output out of this into a selection or to some other options. Usually I just want a selection. But this is the way to get hair. You can drive yourself nuts, or you can just go into this panel and it will do a pretty good job for you. So we're going to do this selection here. Now, if you want to put him on a new layer, you just duplicate the layer. I hit Control J, or you could have gone up here and duplicated the layer. And all of a sudden you've got this guy isolated on his own layer. Wow. And if you want to move him, you hold down the V and you can move him. In fact, I'm going to move him up and put him right over here in this other image, just like that. That's the move tool, and you can move other layers as well. But that shows you how easy it is to use these layers to make your work go quickly. And you're not going to get this stuff in Photoshop. They've got some selection tools, but they are not coupled with the blend modes. They're not coupled in the same way with the channels. You just are not going to have nearly options. Let's talk about channels for an example. I've got the background layer showing. Just to make life interesting, I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to add a solid color black and a solid color white. Hit D for the default colors and then X to switch them around. And I'm going to make a new adjustment layer, solid color. It's going to be white this time. So here they are. And we're just going to hide these for now. Go in here. Now we're going to have a look at our channels. Now, if you have 4 here by default, okay? You've got your RGB channel, which shows in color, but you've also got a red, a green, and a blue channel. And these are really just masks. That's all they are. So when you see the color the picture as a whole, you see these blending each of those colors. But why in the world am I not able to turn these off? There. You can look at each color individually, and sometimes you get you get an interesting pattern or a different level of contrast in a single channel than when you have multiple channels. Let's say that you like this contrast better than the contrast you had in your original. Well, that's actually a little better. Let's see what the red looks like. Okay, we'll go with green just for grins. Let's duplicate this channel. Okay, it's a copy of the green channel. It's going to show up down here. All right, well, that's nice. But if you've got a channel, you can turn it into a selection. So we're going to turn this thing on. We're going to control click on it. And now we've got a selection. We can go back to our layers. Got to turn on all these. Go back to our layers. Hello. Now I turned on all the channels. I need to turn off that second green copy. Go back here. So now I've got a selection of the green channel. So let's go up here. And if you have a selection and you want to turn it into a layer mask, I'm going to delete that. I'm going to click the mask button, and all of a sudden that selection has come in as the layer mask, and it's masking the black that we had here. Actually, the problem is we didn't have the white on. Okay, this is a negative. So we can just change these orders around, drag that up there, replace the layer, and you've got a black and white positive of pixels, which you then can manipulate. You can then change the blend modes of this, luminosity, overlay, should work better than that. We'll go back to normal. And you can use this to do fine adjustments in the toning of your image. Now let's turn these guys off again. Let's use the lasso tool this time. We're going to take the lasso tool. No, that's quick selection. Here's the lasso. We're going to go around these people. All right, they're selected. Let's peek at our channels panel. Down here, we've got, jump too quick. We're going to make a mask of that. Come on. Make a mask of that. All right, now we've got a mask that just shows white where the people are, where our selection is. Going over to the channels panel, and there is that same mask right here. So you can save a selection as a channel, and then you can control click this channel and it becomes a selection. That's a way to save your selections. You can't do that in Lightroom. So how are we going to get rid of these people? Well, there's several ways to do it, but let's look first up here in this bar. This is about making selections, adding, intersecting, but you can set a feather up here, and you want a feather so that your edges are not hard. Anti-aliasing smooths the edges as well. So there's several ways to get rid of these people. Let's just right click on them and do content aware fill. Okay. Well, I need to cancel this because I'm on the layer and let's go to turn off this mask. We're going to get rid of it. We're going to delete it. Now we're selected. We're on this layer. There's nothing on up above it. I'm going to right click content aware fill, and it should bring up the content aware fill dialog. Yeah. Okay, content aware fill. It is showing you what areas it's going to sample from to get rid of the part of the image that you don't want. And you can paint to get this area better or different. But I'm going to click OK. And poof, they're gone, and it's pretty well replaced. You can do a little bit of jiggling in here if you want, but it's pretty well replaced. Notice we didn't do this on our background layer. We did it on a background copy because we want to be able to do this non-destructively in case we don't like what it did or we need to move it around. You also can do, I'm going to make a new layer here, and you can do a pattern, a clone pattern. So I'm going to go over here on the clone stamp tool and right click on it, alt click on it, clone stamp, where's my pattern? Well, that's because I'm using a toolbar that I don't normally use. Pattern stamp tool. All right, I got it. I've selected these girls and I should be able to just drag this over and drop it and have it replaced with what I want it to be, but it's painting and it shouldn't be painting. This is kind of oh, that's pattern. I want patch. You see, you can kind of run in circles with this stuff, especially when you're using a toolbar that you're not familiar with. But you can drag that over with the patch tool and it will fill in the gaps. I told you that curves is the best place to start. So I'm going to get rid of all these things. Shift. Delete. Back into the garbage can. I'm going to Control D to get rid of the selection. Control J to duplicate this. And we're going to run a curve. So we're going to go down here to the adjustments and we're going to go up to curves. Now, notice up here in the properties window, we've got a histogram now and a straight line across. This is going to tell you what your tool is doing. And curves is so sweet because you can take the finger and you can drag up or down to change a particular part of the curve. And that is about all you can do in Lightroom. You can do it for individual channels too. You can do that in Lightroom as well. But that's where it ends. We got sets that we can use to, I'll try this one to increase contrast. You also have a white point, a black point, and a gray point you can use for color correction right here. And my all-time favorite secret. When you don't know what to do next, hold down the Alt key and click, because a lot of times there are hidden menus that come to light when you hold down the Alt key and click. Alt key, click on this auto button, and you get another panel with different automatic algorithms. And you can choose between them which one looks best to you, and you can turn on and off color correction. And I generally use this one, enhance per channel contrast. And that can give you a big step toward getting your image started. Of course, there's more work to do with this. You're going to probably need another channel, and you're going to need another curves adjustment. I made a path. And you're going to want to raise some of these shadows up. But curves is your biggest starting point. Now, dodging and burning in Photoshop. Here's the secret. Click up here, get you a new layer. Tell it you want the mode to be overlay, and it's going to ask you, do you want to fill this with 50% gray? Yes. Click it. Now, paint on here. If you paint on here with your brush, we're going to paint white paint. Going to look up here first. Opacity is 100. That's good. But flow is going to be full amount. You can just drag on here to change your flow rate or your opacity rate. Or you can just press a number. I'm going to press a 2, and you're going to see this opacity go to 20. Press 0, it goes back to 100. Shift 1, and the flow goes to 10. Shift 5, it goes to 50. I want 10. And we're going to paint right in here. And you see it's gently lightening the tone. It's burning just a little. If you were doing this with a mask selection, you could burn just within the area that you had selected. Same works with dodging, only you go backwards, you use the black brush. Smart objects. We're going to skip ahead to smart objects. Turning off this stuff. I'm going to make this a smart object. We'll click on the layer, and we're going to convert to smart object. Convert to smart object. I have a key that automatically does this. That's why I'm not finding it real quickly. Smart objects. Convert to smart objects under the layer panel. So what does this do? It basically makes that an independent unit. And you can go back and you can make filter adjustments in that unit or effect adjustments, and they are non-destructive. So let's say, just for grins, we're going to go to filter. We're going to go, here's your neural filters, noise, distortion, but we're looking for the camera raw filter because this is a good way to illustrate this. This basically takes you back and gives you all of your Lightroom controls. So we're going to raise the exposure. We're going to do a bunch of things. Lower the blacks a little, increase the dehaze, increase the clarity. Texture is one of my favorites. We'll just make a mess out of that. Click OK. And it's going to come back to Lightroom, or it's going to come back to Photoshop. Going to have these adjustments, and you're going to have a non-destructive button here. You can turn it on and off. And you can go back and adjust it again if you don't like it. And you can go up on this layer and you've got all of your blend modes. So you can change the effect that it's having. You can change the opacity of the adjustment. It gives you control that you cannot come close to in Photoshop. Now, there are a lot of things that you can do in Camera Raw, a lot of the things you can do in Lightroom, but it gives you a quick way, the same way with, let's say we're going to sharpen this. We're in the same layer. We're going to go up here and click on Filters, Sharpening. I don't recommend sharpening this way, but we're going to sharpen. And just use the default settings, that's fine. But see down here, we've got a way back out because we applied this in, because we applied this in a smart object. We can turn that off and on, or we can go back and adjust the changes that we made, and it's non-destructive. We're not stuck with the adjustment that we made. Now, I know we've got this discussion coming up in October about using the masking capabilities of Lightroom. You know, if you're a doctor, you can do an appendectomy with a pocket knife. That's kind of what it's like working with the masking tools in Lightroom. Or here, you've already paid for the surgery suite. You've paid your $10 a month. Why not use the good tools, the tools that actually allow you to control your work? Use the scalpel that comes with the surgery suite. Don't reach in your pocket and get a pocket knife. Now I'm in section 13 of this handout, and we'll go back and we'll do things if people want to see them over again. This lists a whole lot of keyboard shortcuts that you can use. And I'm not going to demonstrate them all, but I am going to demonstrate the marquee tool, which is M. Okay, I should have the marquee tool here. It's a rectangle. You could also get the circle out of here, but we're going to use the rectangle. And see, you can make any kind of a marquee you want, and there's a selection. We're going to do it again. We're going to start in her face. Oh, this is moving it. Control D, start in her face. We're going to draw this out. Okay. Now let's hold the Shift key while we do this. Shift constrains. We get a square. We can't make it a weird rectangle. Same way thing works with the elliptical. You get a circle. Now, alternate, Shift, I'm going to put it right in her face, and it's going to expand it out from the center. So many times you're trying to do a circle or a square, and you want it centered over your image, and trying to find the right corner that's going to put it in the right place isn't going to be easy for you. Let's hold down the Alt, make another one. We're subtracting, you see, another Alt. We're going to subtract, Shift, and we're going to add to the selection. You can use these to refine out. Let's say I've made a selection out in the middle, but part of it is a straight line. Well, I can get my lasso tool and draw where I want. But if I want this to be a straight line, I go back and I get my marquee tool. And now if I hold down the Alt key and drag, I'm going to subtract, and I can pull it back to a straight line. A lot of times there will be a sign or an edge that you want straight in your selection. That's an easy way to make that happen. There are a lot of keys here. X over here on the side is changing your background and foreground color. If I get my brush, okay, Control D, I get my brush. Well, turn this stuff off. Go here, Control J, get a new layer. Now I want my brush. All right, I've got my brush. If I want to select color, I hold down the Alt key with my brush, and it selects that color. See, it's over here as the foreground color. And now I can paint with that color. Okay, that's cool. Want to get my default colors back? I press D. All of a sudden, I've got my default colors back, my black and white. Let's say I want the black to be the background color and the white to be the foreground color. Press X. There are a lot of these shortcuts listed here. Oh, free transform. Yeah, we're going to do free transform. Turn this off. Get this. We're going to make a new layer. Control J. I'm going to select out of here. Whoop. Okay. Now, I can move this thing by holding the Control key down. But I also, up here, using a different key, using a different setup. So I'm going to hit Control T. This should give me my free transform tool, and it does. I can rotate it. I can stretch it. I can pull it from the corner, hold the Shift key when you pull from the corner, and it maintains proportions, not with the Shift key, and it stretches and distorts. That's not a step forward, is it? That's free transform. Get it the way you want it. Click the X up here, and it pastes it right in where you want it. A feathered edge makes these kind of matches a whole lot easier to happen. So we've had lots of fun here. Let's talk about the toolbar. This is 14. Now, page 4 of the handout shows all of the different tools that you can access with the toolbar. The majority of the tools are not going to be that helpful to you as a photographer. In Edit, I'm going to go backwards just a second. Keyboard shortcuts. This will show you how to set your keyboard shortcuts for all the different things that you might want to do. Here, undo is set to Control Z. You could change it to something else if you wanted to. You'll see that there are a lot of functions. Here's content aware fill. There are a lot of functions that don't have shortcuts associated. And you can make your own shortcut, or you can change it. You can customize it any way you want. I'm going to go back here because I'm getting ahead of myself and show you. Yes. Quick look at Topaz Labs. They're wanting today about $200 for this package. They wanted $100 for it last week. Wait for a sale. But it includes their sharpening, their denoise, and it includes their enlarging program, which I don't use very much. But where I really want to go is to this page. Now, the link for this is in your handout. But here's a screen that has a layout for the keyboard shortcuts and the different keys that they're associated with. Let's look at D, for example. Just pressing the D gives you the default colors, black and white. Holding down Control with the D gives you deselect, which when we had a selection, we wanted the selection to go away. Control D gets rid of it. This is a really quick summary of these different keyboard shortcuts, and it's worth pulling up. And as I say, the link for this is in the handout materials, and you can go back and play with this to your heart's content. There are so many shortcuts that will help your work. Going back to Photoshop. Here we are. Oh, we've made a pretty good mess out of this. Edit, Toolbar. Did you see what I did? Do it again. Done. Edit up at the top, Toolbar. This gives you a list of all of your tools, and you can add tools or mix tools. For example, the freeform pen tool. You're not going to use a whole lot. You may not want it. A content aware move tool, you may want that. The counting tool, probably not going to use this. You can reorganize your list of tools. Here's the patch tool I was trying to find, but couldn't find because it wasn't grouped the way that I'm used to grouping it. Now, I have made up, and you can download a tool set. This is the defaults, but I've made up a tool set that I suggested, and you can click load preset. And if you get it in the right directory, and here it is, app, roaming, Adobe, Adobe Photoshop presets, custom toolbars, you'll find it sitting in here, and all you got to do to load it is click it. Or you're supposed to be able to download it, just click it, have it recognize that it's a TBR extension and load automatically. But if it doesn't, that's where to put it. And all of a sudden, you've got a more useful, at least I think, more useful array of tools. Which tools to use? The hand tool's always a safe choice. If you've got a paintbrush and it's starting to do weird things and you just want it to stop, press hand and you get a hand tool and it's going to stop doing things. V is the move tool. You can drag layers. You can drag things between documents. W, quick select tool, is your best quick source for selecting things. There's a crop tool. Let's crop this image. That'll be fun. Should be the crop tool. Okay, we're going to crop it, but we're going to do this. We're going to make it bigger. How are we going to do that? Well, if you do the crop tool, you make it bigger, you click content aware, and click the check mark, and it's going to use content aware fill to try and fill in the area that you don't have. So if you need a little bit more sky or you need a little bit more background, this is a good way to get it to give you some pixels on the edge to make your image a size that's going to work better for you. So here, we've added some pixels to the side and the bottom, and you wouldn't even know that we had done that. So, customizing your workspace. This is the last section. This is the one you've been waiting for. Window, we were up here before. Arrange your workspace to consolidate all tabs. That's fine. Now, workspace. You can pull up any of the different panels that you need at a particular time. Let's say you want the patterns panel. Well, you can just click it and pull it up from the windows. But you can also choose any of the workspaces that you want, and you can reset them, you can save them, you can get more. I gave you a workspace to download, and it's this workspace. I'm going to get rid of the crop tool. I'm going to press the H. And I put this together. I don't know if you're going to like it or you're not going to like it. But it gives you a histogram and a navigator, a properties panel that's always displayed, layers, paths, and channels, which is where you're going to do most of your work. Here's where you make new adjustment layers. Here's where you mask. Here's where you do like bevel and emboss. I'm going to double click on here on this layer. Oh, that is not what I wanted to do because that's a smart object. Here's a background copy. I'm going to double click on this and pull out this menu. See what I just did? I double clicked in a blank space over here, or you could right click out here and select blending options. And down here is blend if. You can change opacity, you can change your layer styles over here. But if you do this, you can alt click on these arrows and spread apart, and it's only going to blend if the darkness is between here and here. It's going to blend at 100%. Between here and here, it's going to blend at a gradual rate. So I'm going to put this in, and then just for grins, we're going to change the blend mode. Would help if I had it on. And it should only be affecting the color ranges that I identified. This is really a handy way, it's a cheap way to do kind of a luminosity mask effect. And you've got this other stuff on the side. You've got your history panel, really handy if you want to go backwards or forwards. You can see what it looked like before and after. You've got your actions panel. Oh, let's get rid of all this stuff. Let's go back to the beginning of all this, where we just brought the picture in, happy day. Now we're going to do the actions panel. And I'm going to click on, get it to come up here. While Max is set, let's click on graduation 2. Now, what I've done to make this is going to be quick and short. I told it I wanted to start a new action, and I gave it a name. And then I clicked on record and just did all these things to an image. Then clicked on stop, and then it's all recorded. Now I go back here and I press the play button, and it's going to run through all the steps that I had recorded just like that. So if you want to do the same thing to quite a number of images, you can play these actions over and over. Over here on the File menu, File, Automate, Batch. Hello, File, Automate, Batch. File, Automate. Well, it's because I've got an image open. So let's close this. Close this, get rid of it. Okay. Okay, it's not liking me right now. File. We'll get to that in a minute. I think that I've crashed it. Oh, I'm over here. Here's it's on a panel you can't see. So what you can do under Automate Batch is you can set an action and set it to run on all the images in a particular folder. And then you can go have a cup of coffee and it will go through each of your images and run that action on every one. So if you've got, let's say you've got a wedding shoot and you've got 40 images that all need the same action done to them. Well, fine. It will go through. This is doing something I don't want it to do. It's running that on top of images I'd already run it on. So we're going to stop it and get rid of it. No, we don't save it. Now, if you have a layout that you like, Windows, Workspace, Save, Workspace, New Workspace. Give it a name. Here it is. You can capture the shortcuts, the menus, and the toolbar and save it. And now anytime you want to go back to this workspace, it's right here it is. You can reload these. Let's say you're trying to load the custom workspace that I brought in, and you don't know where to put it. Go in, make you a custom workspace, give it a weird name, then search for it in your file browser, and that will help you find what folder to drop the custom workspace in. Then all you do is click it to load it. Final commercial is for the TK panels. This gives you masking by luminosity. It also gives you the chance to separate out these channels just by one click. It provides quick access to a lot of the tools that you're going to use all the time. It gives you easy ways to just have things happen that you want to happen in your pictures. There's select and mask, content aware, Adobe Camera Raw, content aware fill, dodging, burning. It just makes a whole lot more accessible the functions that you're going to want. This is $29. It might as well be free. The other things are a bit more expensive. So I am going to stop and I'm going to listen. I've run through a whole lot of material. Oh, you're going to take these images back to Lightroom, do a little bit more toning if you like, do some sharpening either with a third-party application or with Lightroom, and finish your images there. You also can go back to Lightroom, which we're going to do. And you can try different color treatments. Here's landscape, here's vivid. But the time to do these things is after you're coming back from Photoshop. If you're going to use the Topaz sharpening or really any outside sharpening program, you want to wait on the texture and let that be your last step. Otherwise, you can screw up your sharpening. So, does any of this help? Is all of it confusing? Are you ready to forget about Photoshop altogether? It's a wonderful tool.
I just want it.
Hey, Max,
Yeah.
can you show people how to change the number of history states?
Oh, yeah, we can do that. We're going back to Photoshop. At least I think we're going back to Photoshop. Okay, we're going to edit preferences. And here is history log. Whoop. Now, I thought that was going to hit it. Let's just run through these until we find. This is what you do when you aren't sure what you did wrong. File handling. All right. Performance. History states. I've got mine set to 60. That's how many changes it will remember in this history panel that you can go backwards to. Now, the problem is that if you have more history states and you have a computer that isn't that robust, it can slow down your computer if you're having it remember too much. But I've got a pretty robust computer, and so I've set it high. But this is where you make the change, is right here with this slider. Anything else?
On actions, if there's a something that you want to enter manually, say you're doing multiple steps and there's a pop-up where there's say you want to set a slider for a particular image you want to set for this image 50, but say on the next image it may be 25. Do you know how to set it so you can stop the action each time?
I know that there's a way to do that, but I think it's a matter of maybe turning this on.
Yeah, that one.
And it will stop at that stage, and then you can enter in your particular settings. Sometimes also you can want to stop at a particular stage when you're trying to make an action and something's not working. You can set it to stop at a particular point and then see, well, darn it, it worked at least that far down. and then run it again without the stop and try and isolate your bugs.
Yeah, I asked that because these questions, because the action and the batch that you showed, I use those to create my star trails, and I find it incredibly useful.
Yeah. You know, if you working with star trails, try and find things in here sometimes is a problem, because I use a different setup when I use my own because I have two screens. So everything isn't right where I would normally find it. But basically what you do to make that star trail is you rotate your screen one notch at a time by a very small increment. And then you have an action that will repeat that small rotation. So you don't have to move it by, a quarter of a degree 500 times in order to get it to move very far. So what else do people want to see? Are you canceling your Adobe subscription? Now you see what you've really got, and cripe, I'm not going to fool with this. I'm just going to go buy PhotoLab for $219. Kiss this stuff goodbye.
I'm tempted.
All right. Well, if people have more questions, they're welcome to get a hold of me. There's a lot more in that handout that will probably answer a number of questions. The other thing about the handout is it includes things that I didn't have time to talk about. There's particularly on the keyboard shortcuts, there's a lot more there. There's a recommended video at the end that talks about using the assign image. Where is that? Image. Well, where am I going to find it? Anyhow, using the assign image command, which is kind of a poor man's tool to get some of the functioning in this TK8 panel. But this is, this is where I work. This is how I get things done. And the more you use Lightroom, the more you use Photoshop, the easier it gets. And the more you find that you just aren't satisfied with the images that you're getting out of Lightroom. And anybody who can't see the difference between this and
You're not sharing the screen.
I don't see
I
that.
mean, that's what those DxO programs are doing. And it's absolutely amazing what you're going to get when you start using that stuff. So happy day. This is where I'll stop, unless people have questions.
Thank you, Max.
Carol, you look like you've been hit by a truck.
Can you hear me?
Can't hear.
Oh,
Yeah, we hear you.
Oh, you're mute.
yes.
There.
Yes.
There you go.
I'm like super tired. I worked all day and I'm exhausted and
Yeah,
I'm
we're not
like
hearing you,
overwhelmed and I'm trying to stay awake and not trying to be rude, but I think I'm done. This has been really good though. I haven't been in Photoshop or doing a whole lot with photography at all for the past couple months, but I'm
Carol,
going
I
to
don't think
review
your
my
microphone's
notes
working.
and there's still a lot of good information and I appreciate you taking the time to show us, and I need to download the information at work. I'm out of paper, so shh, nobody heard the work thing.
I don't think Max did. He wasn't hearing anything.
All right. Well, I'm going to wish everybody a good evening. A wave goodbye. Thank you for coming.
Okay.
see you next month. See me at the shoot on next Friday if you can. We'll just continue having fun.
Hang on a second.
Bye.
Hang on a second. Tom Barron had something to say.
Sorry, Tom, I didn't give you a chance to speak before the meeting, so now you've got your opportunity.
Anyway, I'm waiting for Alaska in mid-August, and somebody would like to go with me, going up to Anchorage and flying into Katmai National Park to photograph the brown bears, and then up to Denali, and then to Fairbanks and Dalton Highway up to over the Brooks Range to Dead Horse and the Arctic Ocean, and then back home. And my number is 1 if any of you would be interested in that trip or have some questions.
Sounds like an amazing trip, but
Mm.
yeah.
Anybody else have anything to say?
I think that's about it.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.